Sit back, relax, and welcome to Reading Hours. Today's book is The Crucible by Arthur Miller. Please let us know in the comments from where you are watching, or if there is a book you want us to summarize in future. The Crucible, written by Arthur Miller in 1953, is one of the most powerful plays in American theater. Set during the 1692 Salem witch trials, the play delves deep into the dark corners of human nature, exploring the destructive forces of mass hysteria, fear, and the abuse of power. While The Crucible is firmly rooted in the historical context of Salem, its themes resonate far beyond its time, making it an enduring piece of literature that speaks to various societal issues across generations. At its core, the play is a reflection on the dangers of groupthink and the terrifying consequences of an uncritical acceptance of authority. The Salem witch trials themselves were a real and harrowing period in American history, during which a group of young girls accused several townspeople of witchcraft, leading to trials, executions, and widespread paranoia. Miller wrote The Crucible at the height of McCarthyism, a time when the U.S. government, led by Senator Joseph McCarthy, conducted aggressive and often baseless investigations into alleged communist sympathizers. The parallels between the witch hunts of Salem and the anti-communist hysteria of the 1950s were clear to Miller, who used the play to comment on the dangers of political and social scapegoating. As we move into the heart of the story, The Crucible reveals the fragile nature of truth in a society gripped by fear. Characters who once held firm moral ground begin to lose themselves, and in this charged atmosphere, even the smallest lie can lead to deadly consequences. It's a tale of power, manipulation, and the fight to preserve one's integrity in the face of overwhelming pressure. Let's now dive into the events that unfold in Salem as the tension grows, the accusations mount, and the consequences of the trials unfold in tragic and irreversible ways. The setting of The Crucible is Salem, Massachusetts, in 1692, a small Puritan village where the rules of the community are strict, and religious devotion dictates almost every aspect of life. It is here that Arthur Miller introduces us to Reverend Samuel Parris, the town's minister, who has recently been appointed to his position. Parris is a man consumed by his own fear and pride, always worried about his reputation in the eyes of the community. His arrival in Salem is not one of enthusiasm or warmth. Instead, it is marred by suspicion and unease. In the very opening moments of the play, we learn that his niece, Abigail Williams, has been found in the woods, engaging in strange behavior along with a group of other girls. This incident sets the stage for the chaos that will soon engulf Salem. The discovery of the girls dancing in the woods is significant for several reasons. Firstly, it is an act forbidden by the strict Puritan code, as any form of non-religious activity, especially one that involves the supernatural, is considered a sin. The girls' actions are perceived as a direct challenge to the religious and social order, a threat to the very foundation of their rigid society. But more than that, their behavior sparks the beginning of a tragic series of events that will spiral out of control. When Parris discovers the girls, his first concern is not for their safety or well-being, but for his own reputation. He fears that the scandal will tarnish his name and his position in the church will be jeopardized. In a society where one's spiritual and social standing is of paramount importance, this fear of public disgrace drives much of Paris's actions throughout the play. He immediately sends for Reverend Hale, an expert on witchcraft, hoping to cover up the incident before it spirals into something more serious. Abigail, Paris's niece, plays a pivotal role in the unfolding drama. She is a striking figure, young, ambitious, and determined to protect herself at all costs. While her uncle frets over his reputation, Abigail begins to assert control over the situation. She is smart and manipulative, and she quickly recognizes the power that can be derived from the fear of witchcraft. As the rumors of witchcraft spread through the village, Abigail sees an opportunity to shift the focus away from her own wrongdoing. In her mind, the girl's actions in the woods were simply a matter of playing games, but she understands that the threat of witchcraft can serve as a powerful tool to manipulate those around her. Abigail's motivations are rooted in her deep desire to escape the oppressive control of Salem's religious authorities, but also to reclaim power in a world where women, especially young women, have little autonomy. Her affair with John Proctor, a married farmer in the village, further complicates the situation. Proctor, who we are introduced to later, is a man who represents moral conflict in the play. He is deeply remorseful for the affair, but also disgusted by Abigail's manipulative behavior. Abigail, however, is determined to win back his favor and sees the witch trials as an opportunity to destroy Proctor's wife, Elizabeth, and make her own claim to his affections. As Abigail begins to accuse others of witchcraft, she quickly gains followers. The other girls who were with her in the woods, Mary Warren, Betty Paris, and others, are easily swept up in the hysteria. Initially, many of the girls are reluctant to speak, but as Abigail grows bolder, they follow her lead. What begins as a simple lie quickly snowballs into something much larger, as each girl accuses another. This moment sets the stage for the witch trials to gain momentum, as the fear of witchcraft spreads like wildfire through the village. The townspeople, already living in a state of constant religious scrutiny, begin to see the world around them through a lens of paranoia and distrust. No one is safe from the accusations of witchcraft, and once a person's name is tainted, there is little hope for redemption. This moment in the play also introduces us to the central moral dilemma that will haunt many of the characters: the conflict between truth and survival. Abigail's lies are fueled by her desire for power and control. But as more and more people are drawn into the web of accusations, the characters are faced with an impossible choice: to speak out and risk their lives, or to remain silent and watch the town descend into chaos. It's a question of integrity versus self-preservation, and it's a choice that many of the characters will struggle with throughout the play. The first few acts of the Crucible emphasize how quickly a society can descend into madness when fear is allowed to rule. In a tightly controlled community like Salem, where the moral compass is dictated by religious orthodoxy, any deviation from the norm is seen as a threat. The fear of the unknown, amplified by the accusations of witchcraft, is all-consuming. It allows people to cast aside their moral obligations and justify horrific actions. As the girls gain more power, they begin to manipulate the truth, bending it to fit their needs. Their lies, once small and seemingly inconsequential, begin to have devastating consequences for the people around them. In Salem, everyone is on edge. The constant threat of witchcraft gives those in power, like Reverend Paris and Judge Danforth, a means of asserting their authority over the people. The witch trials become not just a way to punish wrongdoers, but a means of reinforcing control. But beneath the surface, there is a growing resentment and distrust among the people. The accusations become less about justice and more about settling old scores, gaining power, and ridding the town of anyone seen as a threat to the established order. As the tension builds, it becomes clear that the people of Salem are living in a state of fear. And fear, as the Crucible shows, is a powerful and dangerous force. It clouds judgment, divides communities, and destroys lives. It is only through the course of these trials that the true consequences of fear-driven actions will be revealed, and the devastating impact of lies and deceit will come to light. In this opening stage of the play, we see the beginnings of the madness that will consume Salem, with Abigail at the center of it all. Her manipulation of the other girls, combined with the overwhelming fear of witchcraft, sets the stage for a tragic unraveling of the lives of the people in the town. With each passing moment, the lies grow, and the truth becomes increasingly difficult to discern, creating a chilling reflection of how easily societies can be swept up in mass hysteria. As the fear of witchcraft spreads throughout Salem, the tension in the town reaches a boiling point. The witch trials begin in earnest, and the stakes are raised for both the accusers and the accused. Reverend Paris, still consumed by his fear of scandal, continues to try and maintain his position in the community, but his authority is increasingly challenged by the events unfolding around him. The power of the girls, led by Abigail Williams, grows with each passing day as they accuse more and more people of being involved in witchcraft. In the early stages of the trials, we see how the mass hysteria takes hold of the town. The accusations are being made without any real evidence, based purely on the testimonies of the girls, whose word is taken as gospel. The very nature of the witch trials is built upon a system of fear and suspicion, with no room for logic or reason. Those accused of witchcraft are immediately presumed guilty, and the only way for them to save themselves is to confess or name others. In a town already steeped in religious fervor and strict moral codes, it becomes impossible for anyone to question the legitimacy of these accusations without risking their own downfall. Abigail continues to manipulate the situation, skillfully directing the actions of the other girls, who follow her lead in their accusations. They begin to target people who have long been at odds with the community or whose status and reputation make them vulnerable. Tituba, Reverend Paris's slave from Barbados, becomes one of the first to be accused. Tituba, desperate to save herself, confesses to practicing witchcraft and, under duress, names others in the community as fellow witches. Her confession sends shockwaves through Salem and fuels the already rampant hysteria. It also sets a dangerous precedent. The more people who confess, the more others will be implicated, and the trials will continue to gain momentum. Tituba's confession also serves as a catalyst for further accusations, and soon many of the town's most vulnerable people find themselves caught in the web of hysteria. As the trials progress, the lines between truth and fiction become increasingly blurred. The girls, led by Abigail, begin to accuse people at will, with no regard for innocence or guilt. Those who are accused of witchcraft have little chance of defending themselves, as any attempt to deny the accusations is seen as evidence of guilt. The town becomes a powder keg of paranoia, and no one is safe from the specter of accusation. Everyone in Salem seems to be living in constant fear, unsure of who will be the next target. The central moral dilemma of the play begins to take shape as characters like John Proctor, a farmer in the town, become embroiled in the trials. Proctor, a man of integrity who is well aware of the lies being spread by Abigail and the other girls, struggles to make sense of the chaos. He knows that Abigail's accusations are baseless and motivated by personal desire, but he also realizes that in this climate of fear, the truth holds little weight. Proctor's internal conflict deepens as he becomes more entangled in the trials. He is a man who values honesty, but the situation in Salem forces him to question how far he is willing to go to expose the lies without risking his own life and the lives of those he loves. Abigail's motivations become clearer in this phase of the play. She is not just driven by a desire for power, but by a deep, consuming need to rid herself of Elizabeth Proctor, John's wife, so that she can claim him for herself. Her lies are not only a means to gain power in the community, but also to exact revenge on Elizabeth. Abigail's manipulation of the other girls and the people of Salem becomes more blatant as she continues to escalate her accusations, ensuring that no one is beyond suspicion. Her ability to control the girls, and thus control the town, is terrifying. She is both the orchestrator of the madness and a product of it. A young woman who, having once been an innocent, is now corrupted by her ambition and thirst for power. The initial group of accusers quickly grows as more and more people are drawn into the hysteria. Mary Warren, a servant in the Proctor household, becomes one of the girls who joins in the accusations, but her involvement in the trials places her in an increasingly difficult position. Mary is torn between her loyalty to John Proctor, who is trying to expose the truth, and the pressure to conform to the overwhelming power of Abigail and the other girls. As Mary becomes more deeply involved in the witch trials, she is faced with the moral dilemma of whether to speak out against the lies she is part of or to remain silent and protect herself. This tension between truth and self-preservation is a central theme of the play and drives much of the action in the ensuing acts. The role of Judge Danforth, who presides over the trials, is another crucial aspect of this phase of the story. Danforth is a man of authority who believes wholeheartedly in the righteousness of the trials. His role is not just to conduct the hearings, but to ensure that the trials continue, no matter the cost. Danforth is convinced that he is serving the greater good, maintaining law and order in a world where the devil is said to be lurking at every corner. His belief in the trials is unwavering, and he becomes one of the key figures in the escalation of the madness. Danforth's rigid adherence to the law and his refusal to entertain any doubt about the guilt of the accused highlight the dangers of blind faith in authority. The more he believes in the righteousness of the trials, the more the townspeople suffer. In this part of the play, Miller also introduces the theme of reputation. For many of the characters, their personal honor and social standing are paramount, and the trials are a means of protecting or destroying that reputation. Reverend Paris, for example, is obsessed with how he will be perceived by the town. His desperation to protect his own name leads him to support the trials, despite the fact that he knows they are based on lies. Similarly, John Proctor is concerned with his reputation. But for him, it is not just about saving face. It is about doing what is right, even if it costs him everything. The theme of reputation is not limited to the elite characters like Paris or Proctor, but extends to the entire town. As the trials unfold, each character must confront the question of what they are willing to sacrifice for the sake of their own honor and integrity. The play continues to explore the devastating effects of hysteria, power, and manipulation. The people of Salem are no longer able to distinguish between truth and lies, and the result is a community torn apart by fear. The influence of Abigail and the other girls grows stronger, while the voices of reason become increasingly drowned out. It is clear that the witch trials will continue to consume Salem, and no one is safe from the consequences of the lies that have taken root. The stage is set for even greater conflict as the trials move forward, and the devastating impact of the hysteria on the town becomes more apparent. As the witch trials continue to escalate, the pressure on the residents of Salem intensifies. Abigail's grip on the town grows firmer, and the list of those accused of witchcraft swells. At the heart of the chaos stands John Proctor, a man who has become increasingly disillusioned with the trials. Though he had initially been reluctant to get involved, Proctor's sense of justice pushes him into a pivotal role. He can no longer remain silent, especially when the life of his wife, Elizabeth, is threatened by Abigail's lies. The influence of the girls, particularly Abigail, cannot be overstated. They are no longer simply passive witnesses in the trials, but active participants in crafting the narrative that condemns so many innocent people. The girls' testimony, fueled by fear and manipulation, has taken on a life of its own. Even those who initially questioned the trials or doubted the veracity of the accusations are now swept up in the frenzy. Judge Danforth, along with his fellow officials, continues to act as though the trials are a necessary safeguard against the forces of darkness. His unwavering belief in the righteousness of the trials makes him blind to the mounting evidence of injustice and manipulation. For John Proctor, the internal conflict deepens. He knows that Abigail's accusations are driven not by any true concern for the community's welfare, but by personal vendettas. Abigail is motivated by jealousy and a burning desire to destroy Elizabeth Proctor, whom she still sees as an obstacle to her dream of being with John. Proctor's frustration grows as he realizes that Abigail's manipulations are tearing the town apart. His personal dilemma intensifies as he is forced to confront the possibility that he may be the only one who can expose the truth. But doing so would risk his own life and reputation. Despite his doubts and internal struggles, Proctor is determined to expose the lies of the witch trials. However, he finds himself at odds with others in Salem, including those who have already been swept into the hysteria. Many, like Reverend Paris, continue to fan the flames of the trials, seeing them as an opportunity to secure their own status and power. Paris, who had already been struggling with his position in the community, sees the witch trials as a way to solidify his authority. His fear of losing his position blinds him to the injustice of the situation, and he grows increasingly desperate to protect his reputation. Proctor's wife, Elizabeth, is also caught up in the web of accusations. When Abigail accuses her of witchcraft, it is a move that deepens the rift between Proctor and his past actions. Proctor knows that the accusation is false, But Elizabeth's arrest marks a new chapter in the trials. As her fate is put in the hands of the court, Proctor's determination to put an end to the madness reaches a breaking point. He knows that Abigail's lies are the catalyst for the destruction of his family and the lives of countless others, and he resolves to take action. The role of Mary Warren, Proctor's servant, becomes increasingly complex as the trials unfold. Mary is initially hesitant to get involved in the accusations, but her fear of Abigail and the other girls soon overwhelms her. The social pressure in Salem is immense, and Mary ultimately succumbs to the power of the girls, choosing to follow their lead rather than stand up for what is right. However, as she witnesses the damage caused by the trials, she begins to have second thoughts. Her internal conflict mirrors the broader moral struggle of the play, the tension between self-preservation and the desire to do what is right. At this point, the trials have become more than just a series of isolated accusations. They have taken on a life of their own. The witch trials are now a form of social currency, a way for people to gain power, exact revenge, or secure their own survival. The more accusations that are made, the more entrenched the hysteria becomes. People are quick to turn on one another, fueled by a combination of fear, vengeance, and the desire to escape the wrath of the court. As the list of the accused grows, it becomes clear that no one in Salem is truly safe. The role of the church in the trials continues to be a key element in the unfolding drama. Reverend Parris, who initially played a passive role in the trials, becomes more active in his efforts to ensure the success of the proceedings. His sermons grow more fervent as he uses his position to further the cause of the witch trials. He is not concerned with justice or truth, but with his own position of power. Parris's actions serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of using religion as a tool for political and social control. The very institution that should have been a source of moral guidance has become an instrument of oppression, reinforcing the power of the state and the court. As the town grows more polarized, the theme of reputation becomes even more pronounced. Characters like Parris, who have always been concerned with how they are perceived by others, now see the witch trials as an opportunity to cement their status. For others, like Proctor, the trials are a test of character. Proctor's internal struggle is rooted in his need to preserve his integrity, but his efforts are complicated by his own past transgressions. Proctor's guilt over his affair with Abigail haunts him, and he knows that his reputation is at risk, even as he seeks to do the right thing. His journey is one of redemption, but it is also one of tragic self-sacrifice. The moral complexities of his situation mirror the broader themes of the play, in which individual integrity is pitted against the overwhelming pressures of social conformity and fear. The trials themselves are a mirror of the broader societal issues that plague Salem. Fear, envy, and suspicion have overtaken the community, and the trials have become a way for people to vent their frustrations, seek revenge, and reinforce their own power. What began as a series of individual accusations has now morphed into a system of collective hysteria, where no one is safe from suspicion. The very fabric of the town is being torn apart by the witch trials, and it becomes clear that the consequences of this madness will extend far beyond the courtroom. As the accusations pile up, the people of Salem must confront the terrifying reality that the truth no longer holds any weight. The court has become an instrument of power, and the pursuit of justice has been replaced by a dangerous thirst for control. Those who speak out against the trials are either silenced or condemned. In this environment, where fear reigns supreme, the lines between right and wrong become increasingly blurred, and the very essence of justice is compromised. The witch trials, once seen as a righteous endeavor, have become a tool of tyranny and oppression. As the witch trials intensify, the tension in Salem becomes unbearable. The court's proceedings are no longer about finding truth, but about maintaining the hysteria that has gripped the town. The characters caught in this web, including John Proctor, Abigail Williams, and the rest of Salem's population, are faced with moral dilemmas that reveal the fragile nature of their society. Each decision made under the heavy weight of fear and desperation ripples through the community, altering lives in irrevocable ways. The central conflict deepens as John Proctor, still struggling with his guilt over his affair with Abigail, steps forward in an attempt to bring an end to the madness. Proctor, whose internal battle has been at the heart of the narrative, faces a critical choice: expose Abigail for the fraud she is, or protect his own reputation, and save his family from the trial's reach. His decision to confront the lies and manipulation at the heart of the trials stems from both a desire for redemption and a deep sense of justice. He understands that exposing the truth may cost him his life, yet he feels a growing responsibility to fight back against the destructive force that Abigail has become. The escalation of the trials is characterized by the increasing number of accusations and the deepening divide among the people of Salem. Once accusations are made, there is no turning back. Even the most rational minds are swayed by the collective hysteria, and individuals who may have once questioned the validity of the trials now feel compelled to align themselves with the court. The process has become a brutal cycle where anyone who speaks out is branded as a witch or a witch's accomplice. The role of fear in perpetuating this cycle is one of the most powerful themes in Arthur Miller's play. Fear of the unknown, fear of persecution, and fear of losing one's place in society drive the trials forward. Meanwhile, Abigail Williams' grip on the town tightens. She is not merely a passive participant in the trials. She actively fuels the hysteria, feeding the flames of accusation and manipulation. Her motives, however, are not entirely driven by a desire to protect Salem from witchcraft. Instead, Abigail is motivated by personal vengeance and her desire to regain John Proctor's affection. Her jealousy of Elizabeth, Proctor's wife, remains the driving force behind her actions. She sees the witch trials as a means to remove Elizabeth from her path and secure a future with John. Abigail's manipulation of the other girls becomes more pronounced as she coerces them into joining her in accusing anyone she sees as a threat. Her ability to sway the court and the people of Salem with her falsehoods speaks to the power she wields in this fevered environment. For Elizabeth Proctor, the trials take on a deeply personal dimension. As her husband seeks to expose the falsehoods driving the trials, Elizabeth becomes a pawn in the larger game of vengeance. Abigail's accusation of witchcraft against Elizabeth is a direct attack on her marriage and her very life. For Elizabeth, this marks a point of no return. She is caught in the crossfire of Abigail's obsession with John and the court's blind adherence to the idea that witchcraft is rampant in Salem. Her Her arrest becomes the catalyst for John's eventual decision to take action. The drama intensifies as Proctor's character is tested once again, balancing his love for his wife and his commitment to justice. As Proctor wrestles with his next steps, the court's disregard for truth and the growing power of the accusers become impossible to ignore. Judge Danforth and Reverend Parris remain steadfast in their belief in the righteousness of the trials. Their arrogance and refusal to acknowledge the possibility of false accusations create a climate of fear where innocence becomes irrelevant. They see the trials as a necessary purge, a way to cleanse the community of evil. Danforth's devotion to his position within the court is unwavering, and he views the challenges to the trials as an attack on the very foundation of the justice system. For him, the truth is no longer a priority. The preservation of his authority is. The story's larger social and political commentary begins to emerge more clearly as Proctor takes action. His desire to expose the truth about Abigail's lies is not just a personal fight, but a stand against the entire structure of authority in Salem. He recognizes the dangers of unchecked power, where those in positions of authority manipulate and control the people for their own gain. This is particularly evident in the character of Judge Danforth, who views any challenge to the court as an affront to his power. Danforth's behavior throughout the play reveals the corrupting influence of power and the ways in which institutions can become instruments of oppression. His refusal to accept the idea that the trials could be based on lies reveals the depth of his self-righteousness and the dangers of unquestioning loyalty to authority. At the same time, Proctor's growing understanding of his own moral failings becomes key to the evolution of his character. His earlier reluctance to take a stand against the trials is rooted in his shame over his affair with Abigail. However, as he witnesses the destruction of his family and the town, his sense of duty overcomes his personal shame. Proctor realizes that he cannot allow the trials to continue, even if it means sacrificing his reputation and his life. His moral awakening is a key turning point in the play, as he transitions from a man burdened by guilt to one who is willing to risk everything for the sake of truth. Elizabeth's character also undergoes a transformation in this part of the narrative. While initially a passive figure, Elizabeth becomes an active participant in the struggle against the witch trials. Her arrest and subsequent imprisonment push her to take a stand, and she begins to understand the importance of standing firm in the face of injustice. Throughout the play, Elizabeth represents the voice of reason and morality, but it is in this part of the story that she fully comes into her own as a symbol of resilience. As the trials continue to spiral out of control, the characters are increasingly forced to confront the consequences of their actions. In Salem, there is no room for doubt, and the pressure to conform is immense. The witch trials have become a crucible, testing not only the people accused of witchcraft, but the very soul of the community itself. The choices made in this time of crisis will reverberate through the lives of everyone involved, and the tragedy that unfolds reveals the dangers of collective fear, personal vendettas, and the abuse of power. In Salem, there is no room for nuance, and the distinction between right and wrong becomes blurred. Those who speak out risk their lives, and those who stay silent risk their souls. The witches in the play are not the only victims. The entire community is being consumed by the very fear and hysteria that gave rise to the trials. The tensions between individual morality and the pressures of society will continue to shape the fates of the characters as the story unfolds. For John Proctor, the time has come to confront his past, fight for his wife's life, and expose the truth, even if it means facing his own death. As the witch trials continue to spiral out of control, the town of Salem finds itself caught in a suffocating grip of fear and suspicion. The seemingly endless accusations of witchcraft have turned neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend, and most devastatingly, family against family. In this climate of hysteria, truth has become a casualty, and innocence is no longer a shield. John Proctor, whose moral journey has been central to the unfolding narrative, now finds himself on the precipice of a decision that will determine not only his fate, but the fate of those around him. Proctor's decision to stand against the court and its growing body of lies marks a turning point in the play. His struggle with his own guilt and his desire for redemption have driven him to this point, where the personal and the political merge in a desperate bid for truth. His determination to expose Abigail Williams as a fraud becomes a matter of principle. Proctor understands that the heart of the trial is not about determining who is a witch, but about the power and control that Abigail has over the entire town. She has become the very embodiment of the corruption and manipulation that has led to the deaths of innocent people. Her revenge on Elizabeth, fueled by her desire to rekindle her affair with John, is now at the center of the trial's growing momentum. In his confrontation with the court, Proctor is no longer merely an individual seeking to protect his own reputation. He is speaking for the truth, for the countless lives ruined by false accusations, and for the very soul of the town that has allowed itself to be consumed by fear. Proctor's willingness to sacrifice his own life to save the lives of others is a testament to the depth of his moral awakening. The court, however, is not interested in truth. Judge Danforth, representing the unwavering authority of the trials, refuses to entertain the idea that the proceedings are anything but just. His devotion to the court's righteousness blinds him to the mounting evidence that the trials are a farce. His refusal to acknowledge that the girls, led by Abigail, are lying speaks to the dangers of unchecked power and the perils of absolute authority. In Danforth's eyes, the trials are a necessary purge, an essential mechanism for purging Salem of the evil that has supposedly infiltrated it. The truth, for him, is irrelevant as long as the court maintains its power. The emotional and psychological weight of the trials bears heavily on the characters, particularly on John Proctor. His decision to reveal Abigail's deceit to the court is not just an act of defiance. It is the culmination of his personal struggle. Proctor, who has spent much of the play grappling with his own guilt and shame over his affair with Abigail, finally understands that his own moral integrity is worth more than the false reputation he has spent so long trying to protect. His confession of adultery is both an attempt to expose Abigail's lies and a way to cleanse himself of the sins he feels have tainted his soul. The act is a powerful moment of catharsis, a final attempt to break free from the grip of his past and confront the consequences of his actions. However, the cost of exposing the truth is steep. Proctor's confession, far from clearing his name, results in further entanglement in the web of lies spun by Abigail and the other accusers. His attempts to convince the court of the falseness of the charges are met with skepticism and resistance. The court's vested interest in maintaining its authority overrides any sense of justice. Proctor's emotional outpouring, in which he admits to the affair, is not seen as a confession of truth, but as further evidence of his moral corruption. The town, already entrenched in its paranoia and fear, is unwilling to accept the possibility that the trials are built on lies. The mounting pressure on Proctor, as he faces this overwhelming injustice, is mirrored in the struggles of his wife, Elizabeth. Her character, though often a quieter presence, takes on greater significance as the trials unfold. Elizabeth's role in the narrative becomes even more poignant as she is called upon to testify in her husband's defense. Elizabeth, known for her stoicism and moral integrity, faces a heartbreaking choice when she is asked to speak about John's affair with Abigail. Her decision to lie in an effort to protect her husband's reputation only complicates the situation further. Elizabeth's choice, made out of love for her husband, ultimately backfires, as her lie is seen as further evidence of Proctor's guilt. This moment reveals the deep complexity of the character's motivations. Elizabeth's desire to protect her husband is in conflict with the moral integrity she has always valued. She knows that her actions, though motivated by love, will contribute to the spiraling tragedy. In contrast, John's willingness to expose his own sins in order to stop the madness speaks to his moral growth and his understanding of what is truly at stake. The contrast between their responses highlights the deep tension between personal loyalty and a commitment to the greater good. As the court proceedings continue, the level of emotional manipulation by Abigail and the other girls becomes ever more apparent. Abigail's power over the court and her ability to sway the opinions of the judges and townspeople is based not on evidence, but on fear and manipulation. The spectacle of the girls witnessing visions of witches is the ultimate form of theatricality, designed to stir the emotions of the court and validate the accusations. Abigail and her followers become skilled actors, using the court's need for validation to further their own agendas. This is where the true horror of the trials lies, not just in the deaths of the accused, but in the way that fear can be harnessed and manipulated to control and destroy. In a town like Salem, where superstition and religion intersect, the witch trials are seen as a means of restoring order. The trials, however, have instead revealed the fragility of Salem's social fabric. The veneer of civility has cracked, and beneath it lies a chaos born of paranoia, vengeance, and hypocrisy. The very institutions that were meant to protect the people, the church, the law, and the moral compass of the community, have become instruments of destruction. Salem's descent into madness is not the result of a foreign threat, but of the breakdown of trust within its own walls. As Proctor struggles to make sense of the situation, he recognizes that the trials will only end when the people of Salem confront the lies they have allowed to take root. The fact that he must now risk his life to tell the truth at the cost of his own reputation and potentially his life is a reflection of the absurdity of the situation. The trials, once a means of seeking justice, have become a twisted reflection of a society unraveling at the seams. Proctor's willingness to expose the truth in the face of overwhelming opposition is a final act of defiance against a system that has become blind to the very values it purports to uphold. His actions, ultimately, are a plea for justice and for the restoration of a sense of honor and truth in a world where both have been lost. As the witch trials continue to tear apart the very fabric of Salem, the emotional and psychological toll on the town's inhabitants becomes increasingly evident, with the court's authority remaining unwavering in its belief in the legitimacy of the trials. John Proctor's moral journey takes a deeper turn as he begins to wrestle with the full weight of the consequences of his actions. His struggle to preserve his dignity and the truth becomes not only a personal battle, but one that challenges the entire corrupt system that has overtaken the town. The dynamic between John and Abigail has always been fraught, but it now reaches its peak as the true nature of Abigail's manipulation and deceit is revealed. She is not just a victim of her circumstances, but a force of destruction in Salem, driven by a combination of vengeance, jealousy, and an insatiable desire for power. Abigail's insistence that she is the voice of truth, coupled with her ability to command the loyalty of the other girls, demonstrates the immense control she wields. Her accusations are not rooted in any true religious or moral calling. Instead, they are fueled by a personal vendetta against Elizabeth Proctor and an ambition to destroy the very lives that stand in her way. Abigail's power lies in the manipulation of fear, using the town's superstitions and religious fervor to guide the course of the trials, where any shred of common sense or justice is tossed aside in the wake of mass hysteria. The devastation caused by Abigail and her followers is not limited to just the lives of the accused, but also spreads through the families and relationships that had once been pillars of Salem society. John's guilt, stemming from his affair with Abigail, has plagued him throughout the narrative. But now, as he strives to expose her lies, his internal struggle takes on an entirely new urgency. His emotional conflict reaches its peak when he is forced to confront the moral implications of the choices he must make. His decision to tell the court the truth about Abigail's deceit is both an attempt to protect his wife and a desperate attempt to save the innocent lives of those who have been unjustly condemned. Yet, as John reveals the details of his affair with Abigail, a tragic irony unfolds. His confession of adultery, intended to discredit Abigail, only serves to further implicate him in the court's eyes. In a society where reputation is everything, the admission of such a sin only casts further doubt on his moral integrity, and his honesty becomes an unfortunate double-edged sword. The court's refusal to believe in the sincerity of John's confession underscores the deeply entrenched corruption within the judicial system. In their eyes, the mere acknowledgement of sin is seen as proof of his guilt, further entangling him in the web of lies and accusations that has engulfed Salem. Elizabeth, despite her own heartbreak, is forced into a similar moral bind when she is called upon to testify in her husband's defense. Her attempt to protect John by lying about his affair is a poignant moment that highlights the depth of her love for him, but also the crushing weight of the society they live in. Her lie is a desperate attempt to shield her husband from further harm. But in the puritanical world of Salem, a lie is no less damaging than the truth. The unintended consequences of Elizabeth's decision, the fact that it only adds to the court's suspicion, reveal the tragic futility of the Proctors' attempts to navigate a system that has long since ceased to be about justice. As the trial continues, the audience begins to see how deeply ingrained the elements of mass hysteria and fear have become in the townspeople. The court, now fully operating under the influence of paranoia, is an institution that has long ceased to be concerned with truth. The judge, Danforth, is not a man interested in justice. Rather, he is a figure of authority who is driven by his own need to maintain the integrity of the trials. His refusal to consider the possibility that the girls are lying, and his determination to convict even more individuals, despite mounting evidence of the falsehoods underpinning the accusations, illustrate the terrifying strength of the witch trials machine. For Danforth, the trials are not about protecting the innocent or preserving truth. They are about maintaining the power of the court and the illusion of righteousness that has been carefully cultivated throughout the entire process. As the trials spiral further into madness, Proctor's internal journey reaches its nadir. The more he witnesses the absurdity and cruelty of the court, the more he becomes convinced of the necessity of standing firm against the tyranny that is taking over his world. He has already lost much: his reputation, his moral standing, and the love and respect of his community. But it is his very soul that he now faces. In the face of such overwhelming corruption and falsehood, Proctor realizes that the most meaningful act of resistance is not to fight for his own life, but to fight for the truth. This realization leads to his decision to sacrifice his own life rather than compromise his principles. The overwhelming pressure to conform, the fear of losing one's life, and the almost impossible task of standing up against the forces that control Salem all come to a head in Proctor's decision. It is a deeply tragic choice, but also one that highlights his growth as a character. Throughout the play, Proctor has struggled with his own guilt and moral failings, but it is in this moment of ultimate sacrifice that he truly becomes the man he once aspired to be. His refusal to falsely confess to witchcraft, to align himself with the very system that has caused so much harm, reflects the culmination of his journey towards redemption. Proctor's tragic resolve speaks to the themes of personal integrity, morality, and the costs of standing up for truth in a world that has become blind to it. In a society where the powerful dictate what is deemed righteous, and where fear can be manipulated for personal gain, Proctor's resistance becomes a powerful act of defiance. His ultimate decision to face death rather than compromise his soul is a sobering reminder of the dangers of unquestioned authority and the price of justice in times of moral crisis. It is a decision that does not just impact his own fate, but resonates throughout the lives of those he leaves behind, particularly his wife, Elizabeth, whose role in the trials has been marked by love, loyalty, and profound heartbreak. Proctor's final act, in refusing to tarnish his name further, serves as a powerful testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. As the witch trials reach their climax, the tension in Salem has never been more palpable. The court, which has been complicit in the chaos from the beginning, continues to operate with an iron grip, refusing to acknowledge any possibility of error or injustice. consequences of their actions have started to ripple outward, and the voices of reason and moral clarity are growing louder. The characters who once stood on the sidelines, unsure of how to act or what to believe, are now being forced to make choices that will define not only their own futures, but the future of Salem itself. One of the central figures in this critical juncture is Reverend Hale. Initially, Hale was one of the most fervent believers in the witch trials, convinced that he had been called to root out the evil that had taken hold of Salem. But over the course of the trials, he has come to realize the fatal flaws in the system and the terrible wrongs that are being perpetrated in the name of justice. His transformation from a zealous witch hunter to a man filled with doubt and regret is one of the most poignant arcs in the play. Hale's growing disillusionment with the court's methods and the falsehoods driving the trials is a reflection of his internal moral struggle. He sees firsthand how the accusations of witchcraft have become little more than tools for personal vendettas, power struggles, and the manipulation of fear. He watches as innocent people are condemned to death based on nothing more than baseless accusations, and the hysterical ramblings of the girls who started the whole charade. Hale's sense of responsibility weighs heavily on him, and it is clear that he no longer believes that the trials serve any greater moral purpose. In fact, he begins to feel a profound sense of guilt for having played a role in the destruction of so many lives. In one of the most heartbreaking moments of his journey, Hale visits the Proctors in a desperate attempt to save John's life. He pleads with John to confess to witchcraft, even though John is innocent, in the hopes that it will spare him from execution. Hale's insistence that John should lie to save himself highlights the depth of his internal conflict. While Hale has come to see the trials as a tragic farce, he still clings to the idea that some lives must be spared, even if it means sacrificing one's integrity. His personal tragedy lies in the fact that he is unable to accept that sometimes the greatest act of defiance and courage is to refuse to compromise one's values, even when it seems like the only way out of the madness. This moral divide between Hale and Proctor becomes a central theme in the play. While Hale is willing to bend the truth in the hopes of preserving life, Proctor refuses to offer a false confession, even when it means facing death. Proctor's unwavering commitment to the truth, despite the personal cost, serves as a powerful counterpoint to Hale's willingness to compromise in the name of survival. Their opposing choices illustrate the central tension in the play, the struggle between personal integrity and the desire for self-preservation. In addition to Hale's crisis of conscience, Elizabeth Proctor's character also undergoes a transformation. Her quiet strength and loyalty to her husband have been evident throughout the play. But as the trials intensify and her own life is put in jeopardy, Elizabeth is forced to confront the question of what it means to protect one's loved ones in a world that seems to be spiraling out of control. Her interactions with John, particularly in the moments leading up to his decision, are filled with a quiet, heartbreaking resignation. Elizabeth knows the risks of John's refusal to confess, and she understands the ultimate price he will have to pay for his principles. Her role in the play is, in many ways, the embodiment of the moral and emotional cost of the trials. She is a woman torn between her love for her husband and her desire for him to be free. And it is her support that ultimately gives him the strength to make the final, difficult choice. Elizabeth's quiet, steadfast devotion is especially poignant when she is asked to testify about her husband's character. When Elizabeth is asked to speak about the affair that John had with Abigail, she is placed in an impossible position. She could lie to protect her husband, but doing so would not only further corrupt the court, but also risk her own reputation and life. When she chooses to lie, she does so out of love for John, believing that her sacrifice may save him. But her lie, rather than saving him, only seals his fate, further showing the tragic futility of their struggle against the overwhelming tide of fear, suspicion, and hypocrisy that has engulfed Salem. Meanwhile, the other girls, who were once the heart of the witchcraft accusations, are slowly revealed to be nothing more than manipulators seeking attention and power. They have turned the trial into a game, enjoying the authority they hold over the lives of others. The way they control the court, the way they fabricate stories and twist truths, highlights how dangerous unchecked hysteria can be when those in power are willing to turn a blind eye to the truth in favor of maintaining their own authority. The girls' power over the court system grows as they accuse more and more individuals, sending innocent people to their deaths. The way they play on the fears and insecurities of the adults around them shows how easily the town's moral compass has been shattered. The more the trials unfold, the more we see the growing polarization in the community. Those who speak out against the trials, like John Proctor, are cast as enemies of the state, while those who are willing to go along with the hysteria and use it for personal gain are protected. This is the heart of the tragedy of Salem. The very systems that should be protecting the innocent are the ones enabling and perpetuating the destruction of lives. The deep corruption within the judicial system, embodied by figures like Judge Danforth, is a key driver of the tragedy. As the court becomes less interested in finding truth and more interested in protecting its own reputation and maintaining its hold over the town. In the face of overwhelming injustice, John Proctor begins to grasp the full scope of his own role in the tragedy. Though he is guilty of sin, his refusal to compromise his own integrity in the final moments of the play becomes a powerful act of defiance. It is an act of moral clarity that resonates far beyond the events of the play itself, a statement on the human need for personal honor and the devastating effects of mass hysteria. In the end, Proctor's decision to maintain his integrity, even at the cost of his life, stands as the ultimate testament to his character, and it is a stand against the oppressive forces that have corrupted Salem. As the witch trials in Salem near their tragic conclusion, the town stands on the brink of total destruction. The court continues its unrelenting campaign of accusations, and the people who once clung to the belief in justice are now faced with the terrifying realization that the trials have been corrupted beyond recognition. In these final moments of the play, the characters are confronted with the consequences of their actions, and they must grapple with the cost of their decisions. At the heart of the story is John Proctor, who has refused to give in to the pressure to confess to witchcraft, even though it would save his life. His refusal to lie, even to save himself, has placed him in direct opposition to the court's demands. Throughout the play, Proctor has struggled with his own sense of guilt and shame, particularly over his affair with Abigail Williams. But as the trials progress, his internal conflict shifts from personal guilt to a broader moral question about the worth of human life and the price of integrity. Proctor's decision to refuse to confess is an act of ultimate defiance. He has been given a chance to save his life by offering a false confession, but to do so would be to abandon his soul, his dignity, and everything he has stood for. Proctor's choice is one of profound moral clarity. By rejecting the opportunity to live a lie, he makes a stand for truth, for justice, and for his own sense of self-respect. His refusal to give the court the confession it demands, even under the threat of death, is a courageous act that stands in stark contrast to the craven opportunism of the people who have sought to destroy him. As Proctor stands firm in his conviction, his wife, Elizabeth, also faces the moment of truth. In a powerful scene, Elizabeth is asked by the court to testify about her husband's character. She knows that her testimony could either save John or seal his fate. But despite her love for him, she chooses to lie in an effort to protect him. Elizabeth's decision to lie, though motivated by love, ultimately makes her part of the same moral corruption that has consumed Salem. Her actions underscore the deep tragedy of the situation. In a world where truth has become meaningless and self-preservation is paramount, even the most virtuous individuals are forced to make impossible choices. As the plot reaches its final, harrowing moments, Proctor's decision to maintain his integrity begins to take on a larger symbolic significance. His defiance becomes a rejection of the fear-driven hysteria that has overtaken the town, and he embodies the idea that personal honor and the truth are worth more than mere survival. Proctor's journey from guilt and self-loathing to a final, triumphant assertion of his personal truth is a profound exploration of the human capacity for moral growth, even in the face of death. The sense of moral decay is not limited to the individual characters, however. The entire town of Salem is complicit in the madness that has unfolded. The witch trials have become a tool for personal vendettas, power struggles, and revenge, and the court has become an instrument of unchecked authority. Judge Danforth, the man who presides over the trials, is a symbol of the law's corruption. He is determined to maintain the trials at any cost, even if it means condemning innocent people to death. His refusal to consider the possibility that the trials are based on lies and hysteria reflects his own desperation to preserve his power and control over the town. In one of the final, heartbreaking moments of the play, Proctor is offered a deal by Danforth. If he confesses, his life will be spared. But Proctor refuses to sign a false confession, even when it means his execution. His rejection of the court's offer is a powerful statement about the value of personal integrity and the price of complicity. In choosing death over dishonor, Proctor refuses to let the court's lies and corruption define him. His decision underscores the idea that one's soul and sense of honor are not for sale, even in the face of overwhelming pressure. The play's tragic conclusion serves as a warning about the dangers of mass hysteria and the consequences of blind obedience to authority. The witch trials in Salem began as a search for truth, but quickly spiraled into a nightmare of lies, manipulation, and vengeance. The court, which was supposed to protect the innocent, instead became a tool of oppression, fueling the very chaos it was meant to quell. The characters, caught in the grips of this hysteria, are forced to confront the moral consequences of their actions, and many, like Proctor, are ultimately destroyed by their refusal to compromise their integrity. Proctor's death is the culmination of the play's exploration of honor, guilt, and redemption. By refusing to betray his own conscience, Proctor becomes a martyr for truth, a symbol of the idea that personal integrity and the pursuit of justice are worth the ultimate sacrifice. His final act of defiance, though it costs him his life, is a powerful statement about the power of the human spirit to stand up against injustice, even when it seems impossible to do so. As the final curtain falls, the audience is left to reflect on the play's broader themes. The Crucible is a powerful critique of the dangers of groupthink, the consequences of unchecked power, and the devastating effects of fear and suspicion on a community. It is a sobering reminder of how easily truth can be distorted, how easily people can be manipulated, and how often the innocent are the ones who suffer the most. Yet, in Proctor's final stand, there is also a glimmer of hope. His refusal to lie, his rejection of the court's false justice, is a triumph of the individual's ability to maintain integrity in the face of overwhelming pressure. It is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility of moral clarity and personal redemption. In the end, the Crucible stands as a powerful testament to the dangers of mass hysteria and the importance of maintaining one's personal integrity, even when the world around them seems to be falling apart. It is a timeless reminder that in the pursuit of justice, truth must never be sacrificed, and that the human spirit is capable of remarkable courage, even in the most dire of circumstances. As the witch trials continue to consume the town of Salem, the tragic consequences of the hysteria are increasingly apparent. The people who were once close neighbors, friends, and family members have been torn apart by fear, suspicion, and the pursuit of power. In the midst of this chaos, the court still believes that it is acting in the name of justice, but it has become clear that the trials have long since ceased to be about truth. They are now a mechanism for furthering personal vendettas and maintaining control over the town, with innocent lives being destroyed as collateral damage. One of the central figures in this growing disaster is Reverend Hale, who originally came to Salem with the belief that he was part of a righteous cause. He was called to Salem to rid the community of witches and to help guide the trials to a fair and just conclusion. However, as the trials unfold, Hale begins to see the darkness within the court, realizing that the accusations are increasingly unfounded and the justice being served is not true justice at all. His initial confidence in the validity of the trials erodes as he witnesses firsthand the many innocent lives that are being sacrificed. Hale's disillusionment with the court and the trials is a turning point in his character's journey. He becomes deeply troubled by the false confessions and the corrupt nature of the proceedings. In one of the play's most poignant moments, Hale pleads with the condemned to confess, not because they are guilty, but because it is the only way they can save themselves from execution. His desperation is evident as he becomes aware that the system he once believed in has become a destructive force, devouring the very people it was supposed to protect. Hale's realization that the court is built on lies and manipulation causes him to abandon the trials, even as he continues to try to urge people to confess in order to save themselves. It is in this context of mounting despair and disillusionment that John Proctor's personal journey comes to a head. Throughout the play, Proctor has struggled with his own sense of guilt, particularly related to his affair with Abigail Williams. He has been trying to reclaim his honor and restore his self-respect, even as the trials escalate around him. Proctor's internal struggle is one of the most compelling aspects of the play, as he grapples with the decision of whether to confess to a crime he did not commit in order to save his life, or to maintain his integrity and face execution. The weight of this choice becomes even more profound as Proctor sees the destruction of his friends, his community, and the very values he once held dear. In the midst of this turmoil, Proctor is once again forced to confront the ghosts of his past. His affair with Abigail has been the source of much of his guilt, and it is Abigail's manipulation and lies that have set the witch trials in motion. As the court demands that he sign a false confession, Proctor is caught in the web of his own mistakes. But what makes Proctor's decision so tragic and compelling is that he is ultimately given a chance to save himself. He is offered the opportunity to live if he admits to witchcraft, but only under the condition that he signs a confession that he knows is a lie. This moment is the culmination of Proctor's struggle with his own moral compass. He has already admitted to his sins, and his confession would be an act of repentance, but it would also be a betrayal of the truth. If he signs the confession, he will live, but at the cost of his soul and his honor. He has worked so hard to regain a sense of self-respect, to prove that he is not defined by his past mistakes, and signing the confession would undo everything he has fought for. Proctor's decision not to sign the confession is an act of ultimate defiance against a corrupt system that demands his soul in exchange for survival. In refusing to sign, Proctor solidifies his role as the tragic hero of the play. His refusal to comply with the court's demands is not just an act of personal sacrifice, but a larger statement about the nature of justice, integrity, and the human spirit. Proctor's refusal to lie and the cost of his decision serve as a stark critique of the trials and the individuals who perpetuate them. His final act of defiance is both an affirmation of his moral values and a rejection of a system that has long since lost its way. But the cost of Proctor's decision is not just his own life, it is the life of his family. Elizabeth, his wife, must bear the emotional weight of his sacrifice. She has already been deeply affected by the trials, and Proctor's refusal to confess adds an additional layer of tragedy to her already painful ordeal. In the final moments of the play, Elizabeth stands as a silent witness to her husband's decision, but there is a sense of understanding between them. She knows that his refusal to confess, despite the potential for his survival, is an act of love and honor. Even as she mourns the loss of her husband, she comes to accept that his choice was one of the noblest acts a man could make. As the play draws to a close, the audience is left to reflect on the impact of the events that have unfolded. The witch trials have been a tragic, senseless waste of life, and the corrupt system that perpetuated them has destroyed not just the innocent, but the very foundation of Salem itself. The court, which once sought to root out evil, has become the very embodiment of it. The people of Salem, driven by fear and suspicion, have turned on each other, unable to see the truth through the fog of hysteria. The tragic conclusion of the Crucible underscores the play's central themes of moral integrity, justice, and the destructive power of fear. Proctor's final stand refusing to sign the confession, is a powerful assertion of personal honor, even in the face of death. It is a statement about the importance of individual truth in a world that has become corrupted by mass hysteria and lies. Proctor's death, though heartbreaking, serves as a reminder of the cost of integrity in times of crisis and a call to resist the forces of oppression, even when they seem all-encompassing. In the end, the Crucible is a timeless exploration of the dangers of fear-driven societies, the consequences of moral compromise, and the resilience of the human spirit. Through its vivid portrayal of the Salem witch trials, Arthur Miller offers a searing critique of the mechanisms of power and the fragility of truth, providing a stark reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even when it seems impossible. As the final moments of the Crucible unfold, the full weight of the consequences of the Salem witch trials comes crashing down. What began as a series of accusations and half-truths, propelled by fear and personal vendettas, has culminated in the tragic death of John Proctor and the irreparable damage done to the town of Salem. The echoes of this catastrophe extend beyond the individual lives lost. They reverberate through the very heart of the community, leaving it shattered and divided. In the immediate aftermath of Proctor's death, we see the devastating impact of the witch trials on the remaining characters, most notably his wife, Elizabeth. The toll of these events on her, both emotionally and psychologically, is profound. Throughout the trials, Elizabeth had stood by her husband, though they were both caught in the turbulent storm of false accusations. Her strength, her hope that he might escape the deadly fate of the gallows, and her desire for him to find redemption had been constants in her life. But in the end, her husband's decision to die, rather than betray his principles, leaves her in an irreversible state of grief and reflection. As Elizabeth grapples with the death of her husband, there is a palpable sense of personal loss. Yet, there is also a strange sense of quiet understanding between her and John. Their parting, though final, is marked by an unspoken peace. Elizabeth's final words to her husband, acknowledging the righteousness of his choice, become one of the most powerful expressions of love and respect in the entire play. By choosing to die with his integrity intact, John has, in many ways, redeemed both himself and his family. His death becomes a symbol of sacrifice for a greater moral cause, a refusal to allow his name to be soiled by a lie, and an ultimate defiance against a system built on deceit and injustice. Elizabeth's understanding of her husband's choice does not diminish the pain she feels, but it speaks volumes about the love they shared. Their relationship, which had been strained by Proctor's earlier infidelity, is ultimately restored in the tragic final moments of the play. Through John's decision, Elizabeth finds a renewed sense of strength and moral clarity. She becomes a quiet witness to his sacrifice, not out of bitterness, but because she knows that his act was one of profound courage. And in the end, this knowledge shapes her own journey toward forgiveness. However, Proctor's death is not just the final act in the drama of his personal redemption. It is also the symbolic culmination of the destruction of Salem as a community. The town, once a tightly knit Puritan society, has been torn apart by suspicion, fear, and the thirst for power. The witch trials, which were initially justified as a means of protecting the community from evil, have instead revealed the darkness lurking within. The corrupt court system, the lies perpetuated by the accusers, and the twisted motivations of people like Abigail Williams have turned Salem into a place of division, where neighbors have turned against one another, and the basic tenets of justice have been overturned. The once strong social fabric of Salem is now irreparably damaged, and its people have been left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The final scenes of the play also feature the tragic fate of some of the other key characters. Judge Danforth, who had presided over the trials with a false sense of moral righteousness, is left to reckon with the magnitude of the damage he has caused. He had been so convinced that the trials were the right course of action, so certain that he was serving a higher purpose, that he could not, or would not, see the corruption at the heart of the trials. In the end, Danforth is forced to confront the fact that he has not delivered justice, but rather perpetrated a great evil in the name of righteousness. However, his refusal to accept responsibility or to acknowledge the truth about the trials speaks to his own moral blindness and the dangerous power of a system that demands unwavering loyalty, even at the cost of innocent lives. Abigail Williams, too, escapes from Salem by the end of the play, but her actions and the consequences of her lies are left unresolved. Her ability to manipulate and control others, to fuel the hysteria for her own gain, exposes the deep vulnerabilities within Salem's society. Abigail's departure marks the culmination of her role as the villain of the story, but it also underscores the lack of accountability for those who caused the most harm. She vanishes, leaving behind a trail of destruction in her wake, but the town of Salem is left to reckon with the consequences of the witch trials long after she is gone. Her character, driven by personal vendettas and unchecked power, stands as a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked authority and manipulation. The ending of The Crucible does not offer easy answers or a neat resolution to the questions it raises. Instead, it forces the audience to confront the complex, often painful realities of human behavior and the consequences of mass hysteria. The play invites us to reflect on the nature of justice, the dangers of groupthink, and the cost of moral compromise. John Proctor's ultimate sacrifice serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of individual integrity, even in the face of overwhelming odds. His death is not the end of the struggle for truth in Salem, but it is a moment of reckoning that forces the characters and the audience to come to terms with the destructive power of lies and the courage required to stand for what is right. Through the lens of the Salem witch trials, Arthur Miller creates a chilling allegory about the dangers of ideological zealotry, the fragility of justice, and the ease with which people can be swept up in collective madness. The play does not just recount the events of a historical tragedy. It also serves as a timeless exploration of the dark side of human nature, the fragility of truth, and the consequences of allowing fear to dictate action. By the time the curtain falls, the audience is left with a lingering sense of unease, a deep reflection on the ways in which societies can be swept into destructive ideologies, and the cost of allowing this to happen unchecked. The Crucible stands as a profound commentary on the perils of fear-driven societies and the personal cost of standing up for truth in the face of overwhelming pressure. Its relevance extends far beyond the historical context of the Salem witch trials, serving as a reminder of the importance of individual moral courage, the need to challenge oppressive systems, and the eternal struggle between integrity and survival. In conclusion, The Crucible by Arthur Miller stands as both a historical drama and a timeless cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, the fragility of truth, and the consequences of unchecked power. Through the lens of the Salem witch trials, Miller explores the destructive power of fear, the corruption of authority, and the moral complexities that arise when individuals are forced to choose between survival and integrity. At its heart, the play is an examination of human nature, particularly the ways in which people can be manipulated and swayed by fear and suspicion. The characters of The Crucible, whether they are driven by self-interest, a desire for revenge, or a genuine belief in their righteousness, are ultimately swept up in a dangerous web of lies and deception. John Proctor's decision to maintain his integrity, even at the cost of his life, becomes a poignant symbol of personal sacrifice and moral courage in a world that demands conformity at any cost. What makes The Crucible particularly powerful is its ability to transcend its historical context and resonate with contemporary issues. The play is not merely a commentary on the Salem witch trials, but a broader reflection on the ways in which societies can descend into chaos when truth is subordinated to fear, power, and ideology. The themes of the play remain strikingly relevant in modern times as we continue to grapple with the dangers of groupthink, ideological extremism, and the manipulation of truth for political or personal gain. Through the tragic fates of its characters, the play calls us to reflect on the importance of individual moral responsibility, the need for justice to be based on reason and evidence, and the enduring value of integrity in a world that often seems intent on undermining it. The destructive forces at play in Salem are not confined to the past. They echo in the present, reminding us of the fragile nature of our own social systems and the power that lies in standing up against injustice, no matter the cost. In the final analysis, The Crucible challenges us to question not only the nature of fear and power, but also the ways in which we, as individuals and as a society, confront and respond to truth. Miller's portrayal of the witch trials serves as a powerful warning about the dangers of unchecked authority and the consequences of failing to stand up for what is right. It is a play that demands reflection and introspection, urging us to consider the cost of silence in the face of injustice and the enduring importance of personal integrity. The play's impact extends far beyond the confines of the stage or the classroom. It continues to speak to audiences, not just as a historical narrative, but as a mirror to our own times, a reminder of the need for vigilance, the importance of moral courage, and the necessity of challenging systems that perpetuate fear, lies, and cruelty. In this way, The Crucible remains a vital work that continues to inspire, provoke, and challenge those who encounter it, making it as relevant today as it was when it was first written.